You've never met a person who loved their gas grill more than me. Name's Mark, and for as long as I can remember, my idea of paradise was a quiet Saturday afternoon, a couple of thick steaks, the sizzle of fat hitting the grate, and not a care in the world, except how I wanted my steak done rare or medium rare, never well done. Now I'm a forensic accountant by trade, so I spend my workdays untangling knots of financial nonsense, hunting down money that doesn't want to be found, tracing every penny, and by the time I clock out, all I want is simple. Peace. Predictable, undramatic, maybe even a little boring. That's why when my wife and I bought our place in Summit Creek, I thought we'd finally found that serene lawns, happy families, and a pool that glistened like the cover of every real estate brochure you've ever seen. For a little while, it was just that heaven. Until I ran headlong into the iron fist behind the velvet glove Carol HOA president, part-time queen, full-time menace. Carol didn't just run the HOA, she made it her personal crusade, finding purpose in the smallest infractions. My first welcome from her, a formal notice about my trash cans being visible from the street, never mind I'd brought them in only an hour late. Next week, it was my doormat, not the right shade, apparently. But the night everything truly changed was one of those muggy July evenings where the air itself felt heavy, and I'd just wrapped a week chasing down a client's fraudulent expense reports. All I wanted was to swim, float under the stars, let it all melt away. I did just that, stayed in the pool 2 minutes past the official closing time, then padded home thinking nothing of it. Next morning, I opened my email, official notice of violation and fine. I'm thinking, here we go again. But the number on the fine, $8,000. Not a typo. $8,000. Apparently, Carol had pushed through some brand new compounding penalties for every minute past curfew, and I'd triggered her brand new mousetrap. I sat there staring at that number, and for the first time in my life, I felt my hands actually shake from anger. You know that moment when you realize the person coming after you picked the wrong guy? Yeah, that was me right then. She thought she'd just nailed another hapless resident. She had no clue she'd just poked a forensic accountant with time on his hands and a bad attitude. I figured, all right, maybe this is just a big misunderstanding. I sent a polite email, explained I was new, that maybe a warning would be fairer than an $8,000 penalty for a 2-minute dip. Her reply came back faster than my coffee could drip. Rules are rules. She wrote legalese and condescension dripping off every syllable. Ignorance is not an exemption. Failure to pay will result in a lien. She even reminded me the 30-day payment clock was ticking, with a $50 late fee stacking up for every day unpaid. I sat there reading and rereading her email, feeling something inside me shift. Reason hadn't worked. Appealing to decency, not a chance. She'd drawn a line and it was time to push back. So I went to the next HOA board meeting thinking maybe a little public accountability would help. Carol sat at the head of the table, flanked by her usual 2 board members, looked more like hostages than colleagues, if you ask me. I stood calmly, laid out my case, printed her emails, thought, maybe someone in the room would see reason. Carol just smiled, looked around, and basically announced to the room that if they made an exception for me, where does it end, as if me swimming for 2 minutes was going to cause the apocalypse? Then she tapped her pen on the fine, reminded everyone the late fee was ticking, and moved on. That's when the switch flipped. I couldn't fight her rules, but I could fight her system. And fighting systems, that's what I do for a living. So I wrote a formal letter demanding to inspect all HOA financial records. The law was clear. I had the right. Carol's response: a manila envelope with a useless summary and a note about privacy and administrative burden. Textbook stonewalling, and I've seen it 100 times. That was all the confirmation I needed. She wasn't just overzealous, she was hiding something. I fired off another letter this time, CCing my attorney buddy and quoting state law about disclosure. That did the trick. A week later, 2 boxes landed on my doorstep, packed with jumbled invoices, coffee-stained minutes, a blizzard of paperwork designed to intimidate. To anyone else, maybe it would have worked. To me, it was just another puzzle. I scanned and tagged every document, made a searchable database, reconciled statements, tracked every dollar. Every evening, now spent in the blue light of my monitors instead of by the grill. And man, the things I found. First big one was the landscaping contract. HOA was paying nearly double the going rate to a company called Pristine Lawns LLC. I checked the state business registry company formed a month before the contract owner listed as Gerald Peterson. Who flip over to Carol's Facebook, there he is, Carol's brother-in-law. They'd been funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars into family pockets. After that, it was like the dam broke, consulting fees to shell companies' invoices with no deliverables, critical repairs left unfunded while the budget ballooned with cosmetic nonsense. Worst of all, the reserve fund was a joke, just enough to tick the legal boxes, nowhere near enough to cover the pool repairs, the clubhouse, roof roads, you name it. When the bills came due, and every homeowner would be crushed by a special assessment. But here's where it gets good, buried in the HOA covenants, was a rule about how those emergency assessments got divided, not by household, but by total square footage, including exclusive use areas. Carol's palace of a house. By far the biggest, meaning when the bill came, she'd be hit hardest. I knew I couldn't just yell corruption and hope people followed me. So I made it official, a forensic-level PowerPoint with charts, timelines, copies of contracts, and photos of cracked pool plaster and ignored maintenance. The evidence was bulletproof. But I needed allies. That's where George came in, a retired corporate lawyer shut down by Carol at a past meeting for questioning a trash contract. I found him, showed him my findings, and the man just grinned. Been waiting for this call for years, son. My porch, 5 o'clock. George helped tighten my plan, coached me on how to turn our anger into action. We started quietly rallying the neighbors, never leading with accusations, always starting with what affected them. The cracked pool, broken sprinklers, the money that seemed to vanish. I'd show them one chart, one photo, let the numbers speak. People who'd always felt something was wrong finally saw proof. Soon, a little coalition was meeting in my living room. George taught us how to frame everything as a fiduciary duty, a responsibility, not just a grudge. All the while, Carol stayed busy sending out more notices about basketball hoops, holiday decorations, skateboards, as if none of us were planning a quiet coup. The night of the annual meeting finally came. Usually a dozen residents show up. That night, packed house, standing room only. Carol didn't look worried. She looked triumphant, like she'd brought in a crowd to bask in her glory. She spent 20 minutes patting herself on the back, congratulating the board for fiscal responsibility and community standards, all the while ignoring the elephant in the room, the crumbling infrastructure, the missing money. Then she opened the floor. That was my moment. I stood up, laptop in hand, and said, I don't have a comment. I have a presentation. Carol tried to shut it down, but I plugged in the projector and let the slides do the talking. First up, a chart showing our landscaping fees compared to neighboring communities. Next slide, the contract for Pristine Lawns with Gerald's name circled, and a photo of him and Carol arm in arm at a barbecue. The room went from shock to outrage. One by one, I laid out every scheme phantom consultants ignored, repairs the looming $12 million in critical fixes. The room was dead silent, everyone staring at the numbers. Even Carol was stunned, her confidence draining away. Then George stood up, calm, steady voice of experience. According to our bylaws, he announced, I move for the immediate removal of Carol Peterson and the board for gross negligence. Someone seconded before the words finished leaving his mouth. The vote wasn't even close. Carol's reign ended right there in front of everyone she'd tried to control. A new board was elected on the spot, George as president, me as treasurer. First thing we did, voided every predatory fine starting with mine, hired a third-party auditor who confirmed every dollar I'd tracked, and then some. Carol's brother-in-law's contract canceled. The biggest moment, though, was when the bills for the special assessment went out. My share hurt, sure, but it was fair. Carol's 10 grand, just like my math predicted. She was forced to pay every cent using the rules she'd created. Carol's house went on the market. Her name became a warning, and Summit Creek finally started healing. We fixed the pool, patched the roof, rebuilt trust. The rules got rewritten, fair, sensible, focused on community, not control. The air felt lighter. Neighbors waved again, and my grill saw a lot more use. Here's what I learned. Sometimes peace isn't given. You have to fight for it, stand up for what's right, and remember that even the smallest skill, heck, even knowing how to read a spreadsheet can change the whole game. So what about you? Ever had to use your secret weapon to take down a petty tyrant? I want to hear your story because sometimes fighting back is the most neighborly thing you can do.